the few of you who are actively avoiding South by Southwest, because he's a native. John, welcome.
Good morning. I'm John Ellett, and I am an Austin native. Been here for 31 years. Came to Austin to start the marketing functions for what became Dell, and I was the North American CMO for until the mid-90s. Left, started a consulting company, morphed that into nFusion, which is a demand generation agency that I ran for 17 years until last month. And sold the agency to Springbox, which is a digital agency here in Austin, a leading digital agency in the area. Serves clients nationally, but if you get confused with my badge, which has already happened this morning, it says Springbox, not nFusion, and that's why. So our agency has been a strong proponent and practitioner of decision journey mapping for a long time, and we'll get into that later. But I'd like the panel to introduce themselves this morning so that you get a chance to hear who they are and a little bit of the background. So tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll start with Shane.
Sounds good. I'm Shane Jennings. I'm manager of paid media for ArcBest. ArcBest is a transportation and logistics provider with solutions for truckload, LTL, and moving services, and I do all the paid media, so media buys for the company.
Good.
Hello. Kevin Quinlan from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I work for Land O'Lakes as the marketing automation manager. So we're currently right now building a lot of the foundation, the technology, and integrating it with the data to be able to connect with our customers better online and one-to-one.
Yeah. Great. So decision journey mapping, I think of a lot like navigating from Mexico City to Austin. You can have very broad maps that kind of get you from city to city. Once you get to the airport, you need a smaller map to get you from the airport to the hotel, and then eventually when you're in the hotel, you need a little map to get you from your room to this particular area. So decision journey mapping can be a tool at all levels. So let's kind of start with, are you using decision journey maps in your business, and how?
Yeah. I'll start first then. Yes, actually, our company has been in business over 90 years. And you think that you move freight from one point to the next, and it's just kind of A, B, and everything is gravy. But what ends up happening is when you look at the holistic customer experience, it's not necessarily just how somebody comes and finds a company to move their freight from point A to point B. You find that sometimes there's claims. Sometimes somebody has a shipment that they want to get expedited. And all of these are touch points where you can make or break your experience with the customer. So the journey mapping for us, basically what we did is we took a step back and said, we understand customer experience. We've been doing this for a while, but what specific pain points can we map out to try to optimize and get some efficiencies? And we actually brought in a third-party company to help us with this. We created personas and had a couple of days of really getting to know our customers. And because of that, we implemented several individual plans based on how we found that we were experiencing, or how the customers were experiencing our products and services. So we actually definitely use it and have found great success with it.
Great. We'll get to you eventually, Jason.
Yeah, we are, actually. So as part of Land O'Lakes, there's 3 main business units, the butter side, the dairy side, and then we also have Purina Animal Nutrition, and then Winfield. And so what we're doing is we're starting with Purina. That's our most complex kind of use case for better connecting with our customers online and one-to-one. And so we have gone through that exercise on the Purina side. It's mostly farmers and animal owners, everything from cattle to dairy to swine to backyard chickens. And so each of those marketing teams for their respective animal types have gone through that exercise of getting those customer journeys down. And now it's just a matter of, now that we've got the foundation built with our technology and our data, is giving them the right content at the right time now. So by design, we had started with, it might be a little bit of the tail wagging the dog, but we started with the technology and the data, and then now we've got that foundation built. Now we're trying to connect and have better content.
Great. Let's go back to the beginning. What was the catalyst for deciding to do decision journey mapping, and who in the organization led the process? Jason, we'll start with you since you now get to participate.
Good question. So I think we acquired a business and started a new business line, and then we realized that inside of that, we weren't necessarily fulfilling what we wanted to do long term. So that was probably the catalyst. It came from probably more, I'd say, an executive session than anything else, is realizing that we needed to spend more time understanding the flow of how we wanted things to work. And then it was really, the funny thing was when we sat down to look at the long-term journey, that was just a conversation that I actually had with a colleague, and we started whiteboarding it out, and we realized how there was a distinct chasm in the middle of where we were versus where we wanted to go, which got us all pretty aligned. And the output has been really positive, and people understanding throughout the organization. That's the biggest thing in a big company, is if everybody's not on the same page, then there's a lot of broken inertia. And so, Andy said the same thing. It's like you've just got to get everybody aligned and going in the right direction. And so,
yep. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah. Yeah, as far as what started it for us was kind of to that point. We've got marketing, we've got sales, and we had a couple of people, one person in particular that really saw the opportunity there for an automation or an operations type department. And so at that time, led with getting the right tools and the right data, and slowly but surely have been building that. But that is one kind of missing piece that we have right now. We're still very much a sales-driven organization and a very much a traditional marketing-driven organization, but slowly but surely, like with roles like mine, we're starting to piece together the right people and get the right butts in the seats and to do the type of work for what this is. But if we were to blow this up and start from a company from scratch, you definitely need that sales and marketing operations type piece that's right between marketing and sales.
Mm-hmm. Great. Shane?
I think ours is a little bit of a parallel path with Kevin's. We have some of what we consider our newer brands in the last couple of decades, upack.com being one of them. We've been doing digital marketing there for over a decade, and it's worked very, very well. And we found that there are a lot of customers, obviously, that are interacting with us starting on the internet for the first touch point. And when we started looking at our legacy brands and some of the brands that have been around for a lot of years, we knew that we could take some of the same insights that we had from our more recent touch points with our UPAC customers. And over a period of, I think it was several years, we actually realigned a big portion of our organization underneath a Chief Customer Experience Officer. And the Customer Experience Officer has digital marketing, user experience, customer experience, sort of all under one umbrella. And it really sort of allows us to understand where the customers are touching us for the first time and how we can continue to nurture them both as a lead and sort of a long-term value. And having one person sort of as the light post to say, hey, this is where we're trying to get everybody. Let's just have individual teams do their part. It was, this is how we're going to do it together. And we do our strategy sessions together, and then from the beginning to the end, there's a holistic view of how we want the customer to experience our brand.
What benefit has the company derived from actually putting decision journey mapping in place? Jason, we'll start with you.
I think we're probably still too early in the stage to say what we've derived from it, outside of, I think, just go back to the organizational component of making sure everybody's on the same page. And everyone in this room has limited resources, limited time, limited money, and making sure that we're stack ranking what we need to do to get to where we want to go. Thinking about those types of things so that every project is weighed, through kind of the 2-year journey where we want to end up. So I would just say we're probably still going, but it's helped us just organize.
Yep. Shane, how about you?
Totally agree with Jason. I think it's too early to say that by doing this customer journey mapping, we've gotten X $1 million of return. But what we have done is we don't have blank walls anymore. We have that designed understanding for where we want our customers to be and what the personas look like. So we actually had artists come in and render like personas and personalities of how people engage with our brand, just to make it more real to us. So the person on the other line wasn't just Amy. It was Amy who has kids and has a job and has a life, and these are the things and struggles that she goes through on a day-to-day basis. This is not unlike many, many other customers. So It's more of a, let's get to know who they really are, how do they interact with our brand, and once everybody sort of has buy-in on how we want to engage, that's when we start making the big differences.
Okay.
Yeah, I think little by little, just doing things and having some small wins. So starting, not trying to boil the ocean, not trying to do it all at once. And so on the Purina side, we, especially with our backyard chickens and our flock audience, just showing that it does entail higher engagement. So once you really personalize the content, so in our case, a lot of it is email, and so giving them, depending on what they had said when they first signed up to receive emails from us, giving them more personalized, segmented content, and we proved that it went into higher engagement. And so that starts to set the stage for the rest of the organization to say, oh yeah, there is value in this, because we can see versus sending a mass email where if it's the same content to everybody versus having 3 different segments with our backyard chicken audience, we really showed the higher engagement.
Yeah. I was going to say, one of the things that I actually was just thinking about as we were talking was going through the process also unearthed some, I don't like the word KPI. I think there's too many. Everybody's got 100,000 of them or whatever. But it did unearth some financial metrics that we've never really thought. I mean, we've thought about them, but we never put them front and center. And that's been helpful. As we're now starting to look at things that we know are really important down the road, but where we are today, so that as we're going through the motions of getting the stuff in place, that it's starting to show, are we getting the base lift that we thought we were going to in some certain areas. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As we've done this with a lot of different clients, one of the challenges we see is the point that Andy made earlier, which is it's trying to map the selling process as opposed to mapping the customer journey. How effectively have you done your journey mapping from the customer perspective inside versus how you want to superimpose your selling process on top of it?
That's actually a really good question and a super complicated one.
We got time.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, as you kind of think through it, if you think through the millions of possible touch points that a customer could potentially have, you sort of get this paralyzation that there's nothing that we can do. So the most important thing is to start. And I think what Andy did here with the analogy for Deadpool and Dory is that these are 2 totally different personas that experienced a very, very similar path. So as they experience these interactive touch points, make changes there. That becomes your test bed. That becomes your opportunity, because even though that there are millions of possibilities, there are very similar touch points. And if you can make a difference there, it makes those waves sort of change for your company.
Yeah, I'd say it's actually integrated. We've got thousands of people on the phones, and so as we started to move people around, a lot of those people were phone people, and they have to understand what their role is in the whole process. And so we've tried, we probably could always do a better job, but we've definitely tried to make sure that it's an integrated approach versus just sales versus customer experience, or customer journey, sorry.
Yeah, from the outside perspective, we've definitely gotten that figured out as far as what the customer's journey is going to be from the outside. But internally, we're not quite there yet organizationally, and I think that's our #1 challenge right now, is just getting all the departments aligned and have one seamless customer experience for everybody. But we're pivoting towards that right now, so it's a bit of still marriage that needs to happen.
Okay. How many of you out there have a formal decision journey maps in place for your companies? A couple. How many of you that don't are working on that process now? Okay. For those that raise their hand that you actually have it in place, what benefit are you finding out of the process?
Just raise your hand. I'll get mine.
We had some early hand raisers that are getting the benefit of decision journey mapping. Saw a couple in the back. Now they get bashful, right?
No pressure.
Yeah. All right. Yep. We'll talk. We'll come back to that after a bit.
Did you have your hand raised?
Well, I was just going to say,
Yeah. Thanks. I couldn't see.
Our organization created customer journey maps. I think they've been really helpful, but we actually reorged. Hi, I'm Megan with Avo. We're an online legal marketplace, lawyers and consumers. But I was just going to say, this is such a great discussion for me, because we've gotten a lot of benefit from journey mapping, and we actually reorged completely around those journeys. But there's a lot of friction for people that, are moving through different parts of the journey. So I would love to hear about how you guys work with that.
Okay, great. We'll come back to that. Who else has journey maps in place? There's right there.
For example, I work at 3M, but for Latin America. So what the global team that it's based on US, in Minneapolis actually. So they develop these customer journeys for all the different divisions, healthcare, industry, safety and graphics, consumer business, and they send it across the globe, like, here are the customer journeys. Please start activating your journey. So when the marketers from the different regions received these customer journeys, we were like, but this is not my customer. The customers, for example, from a person who builds a house in US is very different from a person who builds a house in Latin America. So we were facing like this struggle because the global team was like, why are you not using our customer journeys? But we were like, because they are so different. So we started trying to figuring out, imagine we only have one insights person for whole Latin America for the whole business divisions. So imagine this person traveling around Latin America, trying to invite some customers, sometimes not, and only have what the marketers know about their customer audiences. So we are in this challenge right now, trying to activate the customer journey from what we have from global team, but also try to make a balance from what we know from our customers. So sometimes you can have those customer journeys, but not necessarily apply for the whole globe and your audiences.
Great. Who else had their hands up? I know Andy did over here.
I was just going to say for us, we've done this exercise a couple different times, and for us at first it was as simple as let's map consumer electronics purchasers, which was too broad. And so for us, we're a pretty traditionally siloed organization, as I'm sure many other people would understand. And so one of the outcomes as we got deeper into mapping very specific kind of category and different types of consumer journeys was to see the overlap and the impact that we saw across kind of different groups. And so I think that was where the real interesting stuff came for us, was not necessarily just handing them off, but putting them all kind of on the wall and seeing where they intersected. And I think that was a way to really change the conversation that we were having for how we made decisions.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. We have, I'm glad somebody can see out there. I'm blinded by the lights.
Charity Webb with USAA. So
Oh, yeah.
we have not reorged based off of this. We have changed the way that we work, and we actually call it Change the Way That We Work.
Pretty clear name.
We now work in agile and scrum environment, so we've taken the way our IT teams have worked and transformed that within the marketing department. So taking silos within marketing and creating an agile or scrum environment around that.
Great. All right. Any other hands that I've missed? Since I've missed 3 of the 4. All right. So we heard some challenges expressed from those that are doing it. So now's the confessional time. What problems have you run into in trying to implement journey maps in your companies?
Yeah. So I think my point when we hit on two of the first maybe commentary that we had, marketing doesn't control these. Marketing is how you reach people and how you understand how they're going to interact with your brand. But our sales team, our operations team, our IT team, our logistics professionals, they actually are the ones that know all of the different touch points with the customers. So when we did first customer experience mapping, we brought on representatives from IT, from sales, marketing was there, of course, but customer experience was there. And when we all got together, there were no biases on this is the way all of our customers were. It was, these are some of the opportunities that we've had, and these are some of the ways that we interact. And then we went to journey mapping to try to solve specific problems with those same groups. So, the gotchas are that if you kind of go into it and say, as a marketing person, this is our customer, and you push that down to the rest of the organization, you'll have very, very similar problems that she had. That's not who your customer is. That's one possibility. If you're trying to create sonas, you have to create thousands. But if you create maps, there's, like you said at the beginning, there's more than one way to get from point A to point B, but it's a way to get started and a way to get started with that engagement.
There's two things that I was thinking about as we were sitting here. The first is when organizations get to a certain size, they become siloed because they've grown up over a period of time. And I think what I've learned and taken away from going through the experience is that I spend probably as much time internally selling as anything else. And selling is probably not the right word, communicating. That you're really having to go through each department of the company, and I think I'm speaking sometime next month to our entire back-end technology team that really has no impact on the day-to-day component of a customer journey, but we're making sure that they're aware of here's where we're going, this is what we stand for, this is what you need to be a part of. And that's been, I think, helpful. We realized that our product team had a completely set of personas that were completely different that got done after we did ours. And it's like, okay, well, that's interesting, great to know. Let's figure out how we can work together. So that's the first part. And the second part, which is a little bit I wasn't prepared for, but it's important, and it's one of my favorite things kind of my favorite phrases is if you show me how somebody gets paid, I'll show you how they react. And I think that goes for a company, a person, an individual, anything. And when you start to transform a business and people get bonuses and things of that nature, if you actually don't take into consideration how the line level person gets paid, you might actually create unintentional friction and not achieve where you really want to go because you realize like, oh wait, we bonus that person based on this metric, not that metric, but we need to be over here on that metric. How do we actually change compensation to think about getting to where we want to go? And it was kind of I don't want to say this because it wasn't necessarily an unintended consequence, but it's something to watch out for because that, people take home their money is the most important reason why everybody shows up for work and drives their car into your parking lot on a daily basis. And if you start messing with that, it actually can be like a really big, tense moment for people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for us the biggest challenge has been who owns the customer data at the end of it all. So sales is collecting data for its purposes, marketing is collecting its data for its purposes, customer service, et cetera. So we've got the journey maps from an external perspective maybe set, but then how are we going to make this all work? How are we going to actually execute on the right email at the right time? And so we're building that as we go, and we're starting small with different pilot projects. But I think it's that unified vision of the customer data itself and all the areas and all the different departments being on the same page on how we're going to architect it all. And especially like from an email perspective, the thing that I always say is, I don't really care if you're a lead or a contact within Salesforce. In our case, we use Salesforce and Marketing Cloud. I care if you're a subscriber, and that's been one of the hiccups for me is needing to work with the sales side of it to get our data to do what it needs to do to connect with our email subscribers. But because we also have that same data as a lead or a contact, it's given us some hiccups along the way.
Great. I had a conversation with Don Schultz. Anybody ever read anything Don's done? Kind of the godfather of integrated marketing communications, professor at Northwestern. I get on the side, I get to write for Forbes, CMO Network. So he was sharing some perspective on this, and I was asking about decision journey mapping, and his language was a little bit more colorful than what I'll share right now. But it was like it's BS. It's like BS. I mean, this is like. This is how we do things. It's like, you've got 1 million customers, you've got 1 million different decision journeys, and to be able to simplify them is really doing your marketing a disservice. Right? So you're getting at how do you create 1 million or 80 million personalized conversations? Well, as humans, we really can't process that. So I'm curious, with the advent of artificial intelligence and some emerging technologies, do you think you're going to be able to get more personalized in tailoring the way you respond to 1 million different journeys than you are today? How are you thinking about the use of technology to help you improve your response to the myriad of different journeys that customers have?
Yeah, I think we're definitely looking at that. We're looking at more AI-type tools and platforms to help us execute on that. And I think this foundation that we've been laying for the past couple of years will definitely be able to automate that much more. So we've got all these different lead gen web forms or different ways that they're coming into our database, our different audiences, and we're definitely going to be able to do that based on the foundation that we're building, and we're looking at more and more tools to help in that.
I think that if you start using terms like AI, programmatic analytics, data-driven attribution, and all the fun things, you start getting glazing eyes. But the reality is...
By waking up on all that?
Yeah, so the reality is that baby steps. I mean, each of us checked into the Omnibarton registration. Each of us may not have had dinner here. Each of us may or may not have enjoyed the room that we stayed in last night. Each of those touch points is a journey. So when we leave after 2 or 3 days here, the Omnibarton's going to ask how your stay was. And then you have to think of every possible touch point that you had. Those are all opportunities to improve the experience. So yes, AI can help, but if you're not doing the basics, that's not even on the radar. And I think, I'm not speaking for the panel entirely, but I would say if we're 1 to 2 years into this, we're rookies. We're still learning, and artificial intelligence is not going to take away our jobs anytime soon.
I struggle with the question because I'm actually, I think that the tools in the I mean, sorry, I'm probably, the tools aren't that good. And sorry. And none of it connects together and makes it really effing hard for everyone to kind of think about these super advanced subjects of whatever. And the other thing, I mean, I also do some work with some private equity firms, and it's funny. They're all these companies now are starting to come in and looking for cash, and they're just saying, well, we're AI, which really means they've just automated some bullshit process in the back end. It's not really AI. And the reason, I don't know, I'm being a little curmudgeon-y at 9 o'clock in the morning, but you know, I had a call last week with a company that's in your industry. It's a top 10 trucking company, and they literally have never done any digital media. And they are, I don't know, probably about $1.5 billion market cap company. And so I struggle with where things are going versus, to your point, just do the basics well. And if you're not doing the basics well, before you say it's the tool, ask yourself, okay, do we have the right process in place? Do we have the right people in place? Do we have the right things inside of our business that can actually create change? You know, I had a conversation last week with someone in email, and he was like, well, we should look at a new email tool. And it's like, is the email tool the problem? Email is pretty ubiquitous at this point, and I'm pretty sure that one tool versus another, even though some people would probably argue with me, you know, aren't going to have life-changing ramifications, but you're going to end up taking a year's worth of time with your technology team to switch out a tool. Let's make sure that we're identifying the right things first versus just going to the end of, we need some Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, AI database solution, because it's got a lot of buzzwords inside of it. I don't know.
Yeah, just a couple things I would quickly add to that. I think I totally agree with your point on just the tools themselves. They're not turnkey necessarily out of the box. I do think that every tool on its own, or every software, every platform is good as long as you're only within that tool and if all your data is in that tool or platform. But the challenge becomes if you've got 2 or 3 of these different platforms and you've got disparate data all over the place with different databases, it's the integration of all these tools that ends up being really the challenge. And then one more point too is just the technology and data is one thing, and you can have all your technology perfected, you can have all your data perfected, but if you don't have good content at the end of the day to delight and impress your customers and audiences, none of that's going to matter, you know, if you don't have the infrastructure, you know, even if you have the infrastructure.
Yeah, we did a good job of checking off your buzzword bingo card there. How many, the ones that raised your hands on, you're in the process of thinking about this, what questions are on your mind about how to make this work better for you? Anybody want to start with questions of how to do decision journey mapping for your company? What questions are on your mind? Oh, got it all.
Dan, Kid Research now again. I'm not implementing one, but I do have a question. It appears that all the customer journey mapping, everything starts kind of at consideration and moves on down through the funnel as you start seeing actions. How do you account for getting people to that point? Awareness, familiarity, favorability. How does that fit into your customer journey mapping, and how would you approach that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think one that oftentimes is, again, grounded in here's how we think about marketing, which is how do we create awareness, as opposed to the flip side is how does a customer come into the category and what's the stimulus for their decision? How are you all looking at that process?
Yes, so the first part was identifying where we want to go as a company and how somebody interacts with us over a period of a lifetime. We then sat back and said, okay, well, who do we think our customer is? And the neat thing about credit data is we can start with the entire universe and population. and then go down from there. And we have some great partnerships that can help us with that data. But then what we started to think about is, okay, well, here's the problems that people are dealing with. As I mentioned when I started, is credit isn't something that people wake up and say, hey, I need to check my credit score today. It's usually an event that occurs previously. And so what we're trying to better understand is that event and align at the top of the funnel, kind of when we say we want to make sure that we've got awareness around different financial events, is how do we make sure that for our desired consumer that we've got the right products and also awareness building tools out there, which we think around as content. And it's aligned super perfectly so that when somebody comes in and they interact with a piece of content that we now know if you come in on a piece of content around, I'm just using something like I want to buy an automobile, but I'm not sure about subprime auto rates or something like that, we bucket you and cookie you in that way, so that we're understanding, like, okay, this person's interested in a car. What do we need to do? What products? How do we think about that? So, I showed a very horizontal funnel, but we also tipped that vertically, which I didn't share. But it's really helped us the whole time.
What are you finding as the triggers to get them to engage with you in the beginning? Kind of pre-awareness or pre-engagement that starts that journey from their perspective.
Yeah, I'll just say from our perspective, and speaking for our Purina brand in specific, it's valuable content, so it's our expertise on how to care for your animals and make sure that they've got the right nutrition. So it might be a white paper or inside knowledge on our PhDs and our tech team. But also literally coupons sometimes. And going back to the flock example, backyard chicken owners love getting $1, $2, $3 off their next bag of feed. So that's been huge.
Yeah.
For us, we have B2B brands and B2C brands. So there's a little bit of a, you actually have to silo those off as well as you're kind of going through the process. But I guess at the end of the day, when we're approaching this, you have to understand what your business case is, and you mentioned earlier what the friction points are. So starting from the beginning, every touch point from awareness to actual conversion, that's the experience. That's the way that as a customer, you've onboarded them and they've experienced your brand in some way. The journey is more like you're trying to solve a specific problem or a specific friction point. So if a company has interacted with us for years and years and everything's gone great, and then there's a bad claims experience, and we want to figure out why the experience went bad, and is it happening with lots of other customers, or is it just a one-time unique thing? So we'll plot that out as a journey map and say, okay, you've come into our brand, you've used us for years. What went wrong? What happened? And how can we prevent that from happening if we can replicate it? If we can't, we're going down Don's. This is all BS. There's millions of possibilities. But I won't say I totally disagree, because he's probably way smarter than I am. But I would say that if you start, you're going to find some benefit, guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Great. So content has come up as a key part of this conversation, that if you're going to map the journey, you want to be able to engage with content. I know that we do a lot of work with our clients to map content at different stages of the journey, and instead of just having one piece of content to try to cover getting them into the conversation, converting them into deeper conversation, helping them make their purchase decision, their usage, being able to use the map for getting the right content at the right stage by persona. But then that begs the question that Best Buy's got a hypothesis that they're testing, which is, how do you customize to 80 million individual pieces of content? Anybody making progress on content personalization to enable their decision journeys for the customer? Anybody making progress there? Okay, we got one hand. Tell us about it.
So I work at ASICS, Bill Bryant at ASICS. So I think that kind of fits naturally with a lot of people's running types. So that's kind of a clear, easy way that we can start to personalize the content for the types of runners. And there's all sorts of different types of runners, and thus they need different types of content. So the better we can understand who we're targeting, the better we can start to craft that content to make sure it's actually benefiting that type of runner and not just hitting everyone with, how to run a marathon in 3 hours or 2 hours. So That's
Good.
kind of where we're at.
How's that changed your staffing? I mean, how much of a publisher do you need to become now? I mean, for Purina, Kevin, you mentioned that Purina has a long legacy of using content and leveraging content. You've always known, I think, as a brand that was key to your clientele. But I'm curious, for a brand like ASICS, are you suddenly in a new business?
So we've always been the product experts, so we have an actual R&D lab out in Tokyo, so we've always had that expertise and that knowledge and that content. It's just never been communicated properly. So we have a lot of strong content, but we just need to figure out how to get it to the consumer in a better way. So we are building out more in-house creative opportunities and content writers to actually not only know the data, but actually be able to,
Translate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who else has had some making progress on customizing content to the customer's journey? Anybody? All right. So everybody then is going to raise their hand that you have a problem in that area. Right? So it sounds like some progress and maybe worth some additional side conversations.
Yeah, I think, just not to interrupt, but John, to maybe parallel your point, I think that there's some brands that are actually doing it better than they think they are, but what we've talked about is customization and personalization. Customization is a little bit different because I know, from example, USAA, I've been a loyal member for almost a decade. When I log onto the website, if there's a disaster in my area, they actually know about it, and then they're going to make some recommendations. That's customization. Personalization is a little bit different. So personalization doesn't necessarily mean that they're using your name, but they're using something specific about you. So a way that you have interacted with the product or service. And so when you said both, there's personalization, there's customization. I know they do customization. Personalization may be a little bit trickier. Dollar Shave Club, I've talked to Carly. I remember last year they focused primarily on men. Dollar Shave Club was like a men's brand, but my wife uses it, not me. So maybe there's no plans to personalize the experience from a female perspective, and maybe there is, but customization based on what you've purchased. I mean, are you purchasing just the blades, or are you purchasing some of the products, some of the hair products, et cetera? You're customizing the experience based on things that they're buying from you. Personalization, I think, is a little bit of a different route.
How are we doing on time?
About two more minutes, and then we'll go.
What feedback loops do you have to know if your decision journey mapping is working or not?
At the end of the day, I think it comes down to finance. And if I was going to give one piece of advice to what I've learned, so I grew up on the performance side and got super lucky to work with a CMO that was spent 10 years at Nike. And so we became this really awkward beast of working on performance and brand together, which worked out really well. But what I think we both took away from it is if you're not aligned financially and you can see the financial benefit from it, it actually turns brand into a cost center potentially versus a driver of the entire business. And so it's really how you position it and what the metrics are that you're coming up with to see if it's actually working or not. And saying things like, and I've saw this recently, is saying things like we got, I'm trying to think, what's the right PR word? 20 million something views on some other person's website. It's like, okay, well, what does that actually translate into sales, or how's that affecting the bottom line? As you start to rise up in the organization from a perspective of having to be an owner of a P&L, understanding how to translate all this into finance is what's going to help drive your part of this business.
I think we have pockets of a feedback loop depending, but I don't think holistically we've got that all figured out yet. We're still kind of early in figuring that out. Back to my alignment point. And in our case too, back to my using flock as an analogy, it's a chicken or the egg type thing too. It's like, okay, I need to do some pilot programs or some personalization or some customization to show the value, to show the ROI. So we've had pockets of that, but we're not completely in alignment on that.
How about feedback loops from the customers themselves in metrics other than simply immediate performance, but broader brand reputation and brand affinity coming out of this?
Yeah, like in my case, I'm primarily an email marketer, so we have lots and lots of great metrics and KPIs that show that when we personalize, when we customize, our open rates, our click-to-open rates, our click-through rates are sky high. So that tells us that when it's personalized, when there's more specific content based on where they are in their journey, there's a higher engagement.
Yep, we actually have a team that pays attention to the Net Promoter Scores. They're paying attention to some of the feedback that we're getting from our customers, and that actually feeds into these opportunities to find a journey map session that we would sit down and figure out. So it definitely starts there, but it always ends back with, well, if we do that, what do we hope to gain back out of it? Because it's actually going to cost you some money to do something. It's going to cost you some money to change your claims approach. It's going to cost you some money to change your sales onboard cycle. But ultimately, it runs through an ROI calculation, and those are all way different than you hope to see at the end. But a year later, we go back and say, our ROI analysis, how close was it? And then moving forward, how we're going to do it better to be more accurate. But it always has to lead to more money in some way, whether that's through customer loyalty, through keeping them happy and understanding what those feedbacks are, or some efficiency gain because it costs you less to onboard.
Well, Kevin, I will have to say that this is the first panel I've been on where the chicken or egg question was not metaphorical.
Thank you.
John, Ellett, panel, thank you very much. We're going to continue this in roundtable at the end of the morning.